Go. Ventilation.
Yeah, that helped, wouldn't it?
Right, so we're talking about bringing Kazakhstan.
I know what's happening there. That's a high pressure right to wrap that. It can't be the low pressure, so you've got a proper high pressure.
Round the S bend.
right itself at the bottom. The trailer with all the seats on.
Yeah.
Tarrant Hinton, 698. Maximum safe clearing. Near and finished. Completely scratched belted top board tip plate. 14 metre coming oriented. You've got plenty of I think you've got 4 inches west west. Available now for tests and tuning up events during the year. Plenty available to hire.
Patrick?
Was in that corner. Now you see the tractor that's warming up as a line. Pop bang bang, pop bang bang. Thrown completely offline. With a smile on the face, hopefully you get towed back in. And as I said, it used to have case tractor work, didn't work on it. Funny enough, on the phone. That should have gone into a boat. A marine engine on a heavy oil fuel pump. So that's why it does smoke a bit, but once it gets on the pull, it doesn't smoke a bit. There are two pullers, Roy, same engine. And here's Tom.
was the big breakthrough that occurred in agriculture. And that enabled the country to feed the large numbers of people who moved into the cities where the Industrial Revolution provided them with work in the mill.
And the ploughing engines, as you mentioned on the hill, they were an invention by a man called John Fowler, who had been to Ireland in 1849, and he was appalled by production, sugar plantations. But most of the ones we see here don't come. They're all fractional. There will be a few different ones. But as Alan said, in the 19th century.
Right, now to the parade, and the first engine we see is, appropriately, is a barrel. Displays a particularly interesting feature that was unique to barrels, and we'll see it several times during this show. We'll notice that the cylinder block, which sits behind the chimney, together at the same time, and only use one set of link motion and one conrod to transmit the power back to the crankshaft. And this was a feature that was unique, essentially unique to barrels. No other manufacturer made an engine of this design.
Next we have a Marshall, made in Cambridge. Marshall's a little big this year. Front guy, you don't see where the piston goes backwards and forwards. The gears are inside the crank box. A very good engine for thrashing, a Marshall.
And that was a 7-horse Marshall, Mark, which would be a big, substantial engine driving a large thrashing box, and would also be quite capable of powering a baler or an elevator behind the box to deal with the straw.
On the set, it takes the corn from the heads and separates it from the chaff and the straw, but it was static and it's not by hand, so it was all on the go.
The next engine is another barrel, and this one you'll see later as it goes round. Barrel designed and built especially for the county of Devon, theoretically because with that county being very hilly, they wanted a compact, short, powerful little engine to cope with the hills.
Next we have a Foden steam wagon. This is the first steam wagon. The actual movement is called steam parts, and 100% of the traction, the power is transmitted to the back axle by a very large train, 100% of the bicycle. And you can see it in the parts. Foden's one of the main exponents of overtype, as we call it, where the steam engine is on top of the boiler. I would say probably the Foden would have been the best overtype wagon.
Well, they certainly sold the most by a factor of quite a few against any other manufacturer, so I believe they were rated as the best. Now we've got the first steamroller of the day. This is a Enabling Porter, it's an 8-tonner, and it's a compound slide valve. And I mentioned the word slide valve because Enabling also made a different arrangement called the piston valve. And the piston valve was a design that was popular with railway locomotive designers, and most railway locomotives in this country were piston valve, but traction engines and steamrollers have the problem of going up and down hills, and the piston valve is not really suited to incline work because the engine can pick up more than the boiler. So mostly they start with a simpler slide valve arrangement. And that's followed by another roller, which is the Fowler mark.
And it has belly tanks, which on a road engine is used for water, but with a roller, it's actually for putting tar in. And the tar would be heated from the steam of the boiler and then sprayed onto the road, chips to be laid, and then roll them in.
And completing a trio of steamrollers, all from different manufacturers. They did make steamrollers, and there are a few left in existence, and here is one of them.
It's not very often you see a place in the world. It's quite a rare thing. Next is a magnificent
They had a big export market, they sold a lot into Ireland, and also I was told once many years ago that the single cylinder vans were very heavy on coal and water when they were crashing, and so the first engine contracted on the scrap when it changed to
very early engine. You'll notice that the government, the device on the side of the cylinder, you can see it directly cuts off the steam for when you want to operate it on the belt so that it doesn't overspeed. I would say this must be well into the 1890s. That's all for all lady rolls.
Not sure, but I think before the turn of the century anyway. And following that, we have a Bode traction engine. Now, we mentioned Bode wagons and the fact that Bode produced more wagons than any other manufacturer, very large number. But they had up till then been building very elegant tracks. The last one built, isn't it? Very well possibly could be, I think you are right. And one of the features of the Bode traction engine is their very large back wheels with a larger number of spokes than almost any other manufacturer. Quite hard to see that in the expensive market. Next is a quality cleaner
drivers that operate steam, and you can just put it straight forwards to reverse and it changes over. It's not early born.
They were during the 30s, and they were designed specifically for rolling modern asphalt surfaces, which ripple very easily if the roller remains stationary at one end of its run for any length of time. Hence the attempt to create an evenly weighted engine with instant reverse.
Next is another Fowler. Now this one is a single cylinder. That would be a 10-tonner, I would think. 10-tonner?
It is a 10-tonner, one of K's of Haulage,
Which all K engines have the K symbol on the chimney.
And we've got our first steam tractor of the afternoon now. This is Navling and Porter coming past the commentary box. Now the steam tractor was a special class of engine, notionally built to be less than 5 tons unladen, which allowed it, under a change in the law, to be operated by one man. And now this was very attractive to a lot of businesses who are using traction engines, because if you can imagine halving the wages bill for the operation of a haulage engine was a very attractive proposition. Of course they were small and not particularly powerful, but as you can see from the dimensions of the engine, but they were very capable and were often used well beyond the intended limits of their working and something that uses
Spokes in the wheel are a wide shape. It's part of the mass production where they make the wheels quicker rather than being riveted like you see the other ones. These are made in single castings and take back
and that's followed by another steam tractor, this one a Fowler, and they were called the Tiger tractor. They were very fast for a 2-speed engine, only got 2 gears as opposed to larger road locomotives 3. And this particular engine is one of my favourites. It's been in the Coke family for many years now, and they are always at the very centre of any entertainment going on with steam engines at a steam rally.
The next is going from the smallest engine they make to the largest engine. It's a 10 horsepower Fowler V6 train engine. Very famous company, Master Train Services. They also have the 1300 watt scaffold. This has a 5 tons or 10 tons in it. Would that be a 5 tons or a 10 tons switch on the train?
I would have thought that somewhere between, probably the
but they were used for taking large factory boilers and transformers to site, and then they used the crane to install them.
it's nice to see 2 Fowlers, one after the other, one of the smallest road engine and one of the largest road engine.
Next is the Clayton and Shuttler. Now, small Clayton and tractor engine, the Clayton road engine, probably about 6 horsepower.
And that's followed by a Fowler roller. As you mentioned with the previous Fowler roller, Mark, it has the belly tank. Yep. If you look closely at it, as it goes under it, facing the audience, you will see there is a lot of mechanical nubbing, and that is the car pump. It's driven off by a belt off the flywheel, and with a couple of belts, you get the whole time steam through a sprayer bar and under the roller.
And then they had a drifting championship on the top of it, and it was in one pass they made a road. They didn't surface the road. And then there is another Ransom German anti-robbery.
cylinders, the larger one, the low pressure at the bottom, and the smaller one, which is the high pressure at the top. And how a compound engine works is that the steam from the boiler is fitted into the larger, the smaller high pressure cylinder, and then it is transferred by the valve motion through a transfer board to the larger low pressure steam, so that the actual steam is used twice. Intended to make the engine more efficient.
To Oxfordshire, local engine for me, and for many years used to be a siren system.
Another barrel follows on that, which is a 5-horse road locomotive. This is an interesting one because it was the penultimate barrel made of all time. It was actually built at the Garrett Works at Leyston in Suffolk because the barrel works at Sheffield in Norfolk were closed by this time, and the final remnants of the barrel production were transferred down to Leyston, and a few engines were produced down in that factory, and this was the penultimate one of all, and the last road locomotive, because the final one, which was the was an agricultural, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was agricultural comparative, yeah.
So this one, it was new in 1931 with machine cut gears, which at the time was a huge march forward in technology.
It was a great advance, a great novelty, yeah. We've got a Fowler traction engine now, and this one just after the turn of the 20th century, quite an early one, and it was new to the jockeying club at Newmarket, I presume for chaff cutting.
I think it was for either chaff cutting or hay, but for the stables.
Well, it would have done both of those duties there, I'm sure. And it stayed with them for a few years before being sold on. And now we've got a Fowler road locomotive, and this one, although it is not in full showman's guise at the moment, it has got showman's history.
And it was new as a, I think, tabcaster.
That's right, yes. And you will see later when it's got what we call the dynamo bracket. The extension extends forward in front of the chimney, and mounted on there is a dynamo, currently sheeted up, but it has no canopy because that presumably is in a state of repair.
Another one of the Fowler Tiger tractors, this one without a canopy, so you can see it, how it all works. And usually for a Fowler, the flywheel goes forwards the same as the wheels. Normally with a Fowler, they have an extra shaft and they go backwards.
If you look at the front of the cylinder block, you will see there are two exhaust pipes and not one.
Here's a single crank compound barrel, one that started off slightly Cornwall. Another Cornish engine following it is a compound, not a single crank compound. This actually has two cylinders side by side, called the Pride of the West.
And the double crank compound, as displayed by this lovely barrel in its olive green and brown livery, is the much more usual arrangement that all the other manufacturers of compound engines design their engines around, and it's only barrels that use the single crank compound. But I think they built more double cranks than single cranks, but I'm not certain of that.
Next is an Ulchin made at Northampton. This one, I believe, in 1914 was intended for export, but subsequently remained in the United Kingdom. For many years was there by a man called Charles Brickards from Fairford. I can remember my father moving around in the 1960s when he was around here.
And then we've got another Foden, this is a Foden road locomotive, very similar to the Foden traction engine we saw earlier. And you will see it's got a belly tank, it's got a front tank on it, but it's a very small one. And this is the notable feature of the Foden road locomotive. It's almost in case of what it's worth putting on there. So they have prominent strength in the wheels of the manufacturer.
Whether that's the strength or not, I don't know, but they also have normal laminated spring above the motion plate, which is quite visible, and it does give you a very smooth ride.
There are a lot of features of the Foden traction engine that were unique to Foden. It's really quite advanced, and the springing was one of them.
a Marshall S-type.
And then we have
A new engine. It's Foster's made these engines originally in about 1903, 1904. Like Alan said earlier, it's a one-man operation. They changed the law just after 1900 so that if you had a tractor which was only 3 tons, you could operate it on your own. So saving labour, and they were full time technical, so you could move in houses or cargo. It's called them a 3-ton tractor.
And then we have another Marshall traction engine, but this one is a compound, which is actually quite unusual. Almost all the manufacturers offer both single and compound engines for a variety of different jobs. But the majority of Marshalls, we always think of them being single cylinder agricultural, but they did do compound as well, and here's a fine example of what they look like.
I think that if you're just using them for farmyard work, you wouldn't really need any more than a single cylinder.
Single cylinders, I think, were very popular in agriculture for their simplicity and the fact that they cost less to buy in the first place. Less money out of the pocket, less to go wrong. Now we've got T3 relatively.
This is the T8 colour, the most.
Yeah, they were rated as an 8 ton, but they were a light 10 ton compared to some other makes. I talked a moment ago about compound Marshall being slightly unusual. We don't see that many of them. Here is a compound ransom, which is quite unusual, more unusual.
You don't see very many at all.
Virtually all the ransoms were single cylinders. As I say, they offered compounding, of course.
And a particular thing on the ransoms, you'll see on the side of the boiler, there is a large plug which you can undo, not available to every engine.
Now we have a Bowden D-type. The D-type was the short tractor version of the C-type wagon, which was the last overtime wagon designed by Bowden. What we might call the modern overtime. This is a genuine D-type. You had the typical tractors aboard in Essex. They were specialists in cricket bat willow, which grew very well on some of the Essex tributaries. And all the genuine D-types were on solid tyres.
You see the windrow in the back, it's a very large drum, which is the narrow wheels and the wheels, and that they were using extensively for extracting the timber from woods.
An advance on what is on previously, but it's hard work.
Following that is a McLaren, the first McLaren we had. This one has been repatriated from South America. It's a lovely engine, compound engine, McLarens. They didn't make as many engines as a lot of the other manufacturers, but they did make them very well.
I've got to leave you to talk about this.
Well, Gibbons and Robinson, they could be named in Haulage engineering company, owned by Lord Wantage. It's now in Oxfordshire, it was in Berkshire. They went through about 3 or 4 different names, but the design stayed the same. They were a good engine, but just, not many of them survived. I suppose they all got worn out and got sold.
And that's followed by another D-type tractor, but this one didn't see service with a timber merchant. This was due to Herefordshire Council, just over the hill there, between the Malverns and the Welsh border. And it was one of 3 D-types that Herefordshire bought to haul roadstone and generally be available for road maintenance. Given the state of the roads in Herefordshire now, apart from the fact that they would never be able to afford a machine like this, it would be good to see it back at work doing that job.
Following that is it looks the same, but this is actually a steam wagon that's been made shorter. The government in the early 1930s introduced taxation, which was like a body on it, you had to pay a lot of tax. But if you had a drawbar, you pulled the trailer, you didn't pay half as much. So that's why I can see.
Having got a Fowler Road loco, familiar one to many of us who go down the road, so I think this is the engine presented by the Marriage family, very enthusiastic. You'll see that the girls up there in charge of it, as they should be, all the girls, and it's always
done more for the traction engine movement than a lot of other things. The late Fred Dibner, his son Roger's driving it, and we've all seen the history of how he rebuilt it. He's carrying some of the machinery in his workshop. It's been recently reboiled, and it's nice to see that in the back.
Here's one of my favourite engines. Wonderful engine, men, wonderful engine, and it's great to see them up here.
And it came from Scotland originally, which you wonder why did they have a single crank compound when a compound would have done just as well, but it came from Scotland. It is a 3-speed road locomotive, but it only has a single crank compound arrangement, which is a very unusual arrangement of barrels. A Garrett Ford CV tractor. Garrett's made lots and lots of these. Garrett's, as I mentioned earlier, in a factory in Leeds, very near to where sizeable power station now. And they made huge numbers of these tractors. They called them a 5-ton tractor, but they were about 7.5, didn't they?
They were for a steam tractor. You can see they are have a much larger standard size compared to the Tiger or the 8 that you've seen earlier, and they were very powerful. They were capable of driving a medium-sized thrashing box and an elevator, doing what's called double work. And I doubt that any other size of tractor would cope with that.
Next is a Burrell road locomotive, Independence. This one was actually the part of this the showman's engine, but here we see it restored to its original working condition, and you can hardly hear it going by. It really has been restored very well.
And now a Burrell single. We've seen one Burrell single, here's another one.
Quite an early one.
Yes, I'm just trying to gauge the size.
I think it's an 8 horse.
It has got a very
The most photographed road locomotive, certainly in these parts, from Robert Wynns at Newport. They had it brand new in, I think, 1919, if not 1920, and they kept it right up until the 1990s. They used to have the old drivers that took after it, take it to the show. I remember in the 1960s, 1970s, one of the old Stamford drivers who kept it on over the time, just to look after it.
Wynns is of course very, very famous in the audience, right the way through until the modern era. Particularly in this part of the world, as you say, before the motorways, they would bring vast loads on their girder trailers with several Scammell or Diamond T tractors up through on the A38, right up through the centre of Worcester.
Well, they took it on Tewkesbury before it.
They set it up through Tewkesbury,
Of course, which if you imagine with a 12-foot wide road, 100-foot long, must have been a bit tight.
Nothing stopped the wheels.
You'll notice the front wheels are set back a bit. This helps if you're in a tight farmyard because it gives you a better turning circle.
And as a special aside, Jeff just told me Lucy, his granddaughter, is 23 today. So stand up, Lucy, take a bow.
You're not embarrassed, are you?
And while all that was going on, we had a gold medal sneaked by,
Which is Burrell's answer to the 5-ton tractor.
the gold medal. That's because Burrell's actually won a competition with another manufacturer in 1907.
And as they won the gold medal in that competition, they decided to call them all gold medal factories. And compared to the other countries, Burrell is built on very well.
They're probably the most sought after and desirable of these tractors. Another Foster, this Foster, particular agricultural gun has got a particular feature that you will notice, ladies and gentlemen. If you look on the stroke box door, you will see there is a curious sort of parallelogram lozenge-shaped device at the bottom of the door reel. And that is actually the silhouette of a First World War tank. And the reason for this is that the tanks were great secrecy designed and the early ones built by Fosters at Lincoln. And after the war, to commemorate that fact, when it wasn't secret anymore, tractors attached this badge to all their post-war engines. So if you see a Foster engine with a First World War silhouette tank badge on the smoke box door, you know it's after 1990.
And actually, as you said, it was done in great secrecy. We weren't allowed to call them, the people at the time weren't allowed to call them land ships. And then the code word is that they were known as water carriers from Mesopotamia. And the workers just thought, well, we can't be bothered to call them that, we just call them tanks. And that's where the word tank comes from.
Which is now brought into worldwide universal use. It was Churchill who wanted to call them land ships.
And following that was a podium, yet another podium, so the third one was
Now we've got our second McLaren road locomotive of the afternoon.
for many years owned by John Brown. And it has been beautifully rebuilt by the Woodward family. Two-wheel driving.
We've got a 5-horsepower general purpose engine. This engine really is a quick, like an estate engine, designed for use on the belt and for road hauling. That's why it has a front tank, a belly tank to the storage. But if you look carefully, you'll see that on the near side that's there.
And the same one, just the same, another West Country engine. This one a little bit later, 3903, probably about 1921-22. As on the front of the engine, which was a group of companies that several of them were not doing very well, so they thought, oh well, we'll all get together and call ourselves the Amalgamated General, was it Amalgamated or Associated General? Amalgamated General Engineers, which actually didn't last for long.
And that was the reason that the last few boroughs were actually built by Garrett's relations because they were of the AGE group. So when AGE closed the Deptford Works of Burrows, they had the Leiston Works of Garrett available to do the remaining borough work. And indeed, Garrett's of Leiston went on supplying borough parts for many years after that. It was where you went to buy your borough bit.
Next is a 7-horsepower Burrow agriculture engine. I remember the engine. We had it in the 1970s and sold it on to Ted Freeman, who was a well-known chap who sadly passed away recently. And he did a beautiful job on it. It's now come all the way over from Ireland, and it's recently had brand new tyres fitted to it, and it does go along quite well.
And here we have our second Foden C-type wagon, overtype wagon of the afternoon. As Mark described earlier, essentially the layout of the Foden overtype was similar to a scaled-down traction engine with a cinder block behind the chimney and the crankshaft plate behind that and the link rods between the two. The particular features of the C-type you can see just in front of the rear wheels as it goes past. And the majority of the C-type wagons were with pneumatic tyres, which were of course much more comfortable and effective for high-speed running on the road, but do require you to carry a spare. And you'll see that the spare is mounted on a spare wheel carrier right at the back on the underside of the body.
And a lot of the motors we said earlier have been cut down to tractors. This one has still got its full-length body. And the reason it stayed like that is because it had a tar tank on for many years and was used in the Lake District for spraying tar to go to resurfacing. Neck-Mariners were on strike at the time when Allens of Oxford wanted some steamrollers, and they supplied them with the parts because the workers weren't there to erect it. And this engine was actually built in Oxford, not in Leeds.
And that's followed by another Ransom single-cylinder general-purpose thrashing engine. And you can see that this is so typical of the Ransoms. Single-cylinder, nose of motion, working straightforward, simple. I suppose they were almost towards the stage of the agricultural engines.
Next is the second of the Burrell Gold Medal tractors. This one's got a 3/4 load canopy. I think it was originally in Surrey, wasn't it? Yes, this was... Following that is another manufacturer, their idea of a 5-ton tractor, and this is a Tasker. Taskers were made in Andover and were very well known for making trains. A particular feature of this engine is that the drive is much like the Bowden, where it goes on a chain to the back wheels. As an independent suspension, you'll notice it's called Jolly, and I can tell you that not everyone knows that Jolly was the name of the hall, the name of the store that was named for one of the old trials on the farm on the Tasker chain drive P2s were very fast engines. Traditionally, with the chain drive, they would and so on the way home, that 150 miles an hour had to touch it at all.
Following that tractor, we have making stately process. We have another Farrow roller.
A 10-ton, I would imagine, which is with Fowlers, they normally call them with letters of numbers. It's probably a DH, which signifies the size and the type. Some of the rollers made by Fowler had a headstock.
They're not easy to bring and choose that. They've been one of the final series with the slide valve. Now people think Avery Porter made a vast number of steamrollers. They made more steamrollers than all the other manufacturers put together, or so it's claimed. And so numerous were they in the days when steamrollers were the normal thing you saw on the roads, that a lot of people actually thought that all steamrollers had rampant brass horses on the front, which of course that really is the badge, is in actual fact the emblem of the county of Kent.
Following that is a tandem roller, which means it's only got 2 rolls.
Not very common at all, in order to fire up.
And it doesn't have a steering wheel, per se. It steers it by moving the lever backwards and forwards, and that actually operates the steam operating steering.
We have another Tasker tractor. Now we see the chain drive version going around, solid, and now we see the gear drive version.
When you see all the official photographs in black and white, it shows up half the stuff. They used to paint it grey, and then they would finish painting it whatever the customer required after.
They were popular with contractors who were tending to be paid on a yardage basis. In other words, the more surface they rolled, the more they got paid. These T3s are very, very difficult rollers, and so therefore a good T3 driver could cover more ground than the driver of a larger roller, and so the owner would be getting a larger bill.
We're left with half of the surviving Tiger tractors here, aren't we?
If I can cast my mind back to last year, Mark, didn't you discover that the collective noun for tigers is an ambush of tigers?
Yes. So we have an ambush of tigers here. Now this Foster's also made slightly larger tractors than the 3-tonner we saw earlier. This is a 5-ton Foster tractor, which I think has recently had a lot of work on it. It does look quite nice. I think, did we not see that?
Well, quite possibly we did. It's one of their Wellington tractors, this particular size, and they were quite a numerous engine, quite a large percentage of Foster's output was the Wellington tractor.
Another Marshall agriculture, a simple I think it's a 7 horsepower.
Passing my mind back, there were 2 or 3 Marshalls go to bed, weren't there?
Yes, and not your grandfather. Not played all these compounds, but this one I think belonged to Derek West, who for many years was the crew on the Haulage, which came to earlier. And Marshalls, they call this engine the OK type, which means OK standing for old cladding.
It's cladding. Now you'll see that between the smoke box where the chimney and the front wheels are and the firebox just in front of the flywheel, the boiler barrel looks smaller in diameter than other engines that we've seen, and this is because there is no lagging and cladding on it, and that should be clad with lagged with strips of wood originally, and then the tin sheet of the cladding is wrapped around and held on with the brass boiler band. So,
Which insulates it and keeps all the heat in.
yeah, the idea of course is not to retain the heat, but because this engine hasn't got its cladding and lagging on, you can see
All the detail of how the boiler is constructed and the giant rivets that hold it all together. I think you can stuck it in three to stuff it in. I think it did spend an enormous amount of time on the side by top end.
for two racing classes, which ended up bizarre in the wrong place.
I think we want to run away.
Engine that display has steam power with applied junction work, road haulage, agricultural work, road rolling, training, all sorts of different ways in which steam engine has provided a great service to mankind. One of the things I think we ought to remember is that this type of
Was how they did it. And American engines would be towing long, thick ploughs, probably 10 furrows, across the prairies. But we can't do it in this country. So Fowler devised the method of using winches. I think that means there's a submarine off the port bow. Okay, drivers, thank you all very much indeed. Don't waste all the steam you need to get out of the ring. And if you'd like to... hardly occurred at all, apart from ploughing engines who signal to each other with their whistles. But otherwise... So there we are, ladies and gentlemen, a fine display of steam power, probably as good as you'll see anywhere, certainly as you'll see anywhere in the country this year. Thank you to all the engine drivers, the owners, the crews, and the hangers-on who turn up to polish in the morning to make this a tremendous display. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for another go, but from Mark and me now this afternoon, it's thank you and goodbye. And I must apologise, I didn't mention the locomobile steam car that went round as well. That was a cream one that went by earlier, sorry about that. But as Alan said, yes, we'll see you tomorrow. There might even be more engines, who knows. But thank you very much from myself and from Alan.
Goodbye.
in my arms tonight. You look like I'm nervous, now don't turn if it's dead and never wanted you.
But yeah, so Fowler ploughing engine used to belong to, in full size, the Beebe brothers. Now the Beebe brothers, they were big agricultural contractors that used to run these with pairs of engines. And this was in number 4 pair. And they were contractors who would send ploughing engines all over the country, the Beebe brothers. So lovely to have that, very rare engine, that's come all the way from Chipping North. And that concludes our lineup of engines here at Welland. We might have a couple more coming in tomorrow, but I think that's over 40 that's coming today, so I'm quite impressed with that. So, if anyone would like to come in for a picture once they pull up, and then I'll just give you a shout, you can come in, take some pictures, and then we'll clear the ring then after that. Alright, if any of you would like to come in and take some pictures, if you want to come in now, you're more than welcome.
They got the value now.
What is it? Rated to Hawk?
I bought a number plate.
glad to get out and test it.
Manufacturer.
Yeah.
After the war.
It's called Dundalkin Island.
It's a bit of kelp, you know. When we move now, when we have a bit of land, we'll have- No, I know. Yeah. And when we were, I was cheap, huh?
We don't drink it.